Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, the High Guy Jacobs, and today we're taking a look at part 3 of our deep dive into the infantry heroes, and this time we're taking a look at the garrison heroes. We've already looked at field fighters and rally heroes. It is now time to look at the remaining 4 heroes that we have, and exactly why I believe they are the ones you are going to use for garrison. Now, just remember, this doesn't include multi-line garrison, so you're not going to see Victor here, even though he is probably one of the best ones for garrisoning your shelter and things like that. What we are going to be talking about is the focusing of those garrisons for when you're garrisoning towers or other targets, towers or outposts or things like that, okay? So let's go ahead and deep dive into these heroes, starting with the one and only Riven. If you play infantry and if you are looking to garrison, you better have Riven unlocked and awakened because she is an absolute beast. She was released shortly after Thunder, when Thunder was taking his huge ownership of the pretty much ownership of the garrison. Riven was released, and since then she has been absolutely dominating, and you're going to see why. Not to mention the synergy that she has with certain individuals and certain other heroes. You'll see exactly why she is one of the top garrison heroes in the game, and obviously why I've got her awakened myself. So first things first, Viking Heart Riven. Her first skill is called Raining Punches. Rage skill requiring 1000 rage, dealing damage to the target every 4 seconds. Every second for 4 seconds at a damage factor of 3900. So let's do some quick math. 3900 times 4 is... That's right, folks. I just totally bombed that. 4 times 4 is 16. That's right. 1,560 damage. That's 1,560 damage that she's dealing out to a target. Okay, so she's already punching pretty hard. And then if she's garrisoning, she's increasing the squad defense by an additional 32% for 3 seconds. That being said, this becomes a situation where she obviously increases that tankiness, makes you a little bit harder to deal damage to, and she's punching for a pretty severe amount. Next, her prosthetic arm passive skill increases the infantry squad HP by 30%. When in alliance territory, infantry squad increases by an additional 15%. So first off, she's doing 32% here for 3 seconds every time she does a skill, which, if you know skills, typically trigger once every 5 seconds. Basically means that you're going to be dealing a serious amount of damage consistently and making yourself tanky. Now, this says when alliance territory, so this does mean that you can technically use her in the field if you're fighting within your own territory to still get that buff and still get that benefit. You obviously don't get this benefit here, this squad defense, if you're not garrisoning, but you know, you still have some of that benefit, still getting some of that defense in the field. Now we've got Indomitable Soul, which is another passive skill, increasing infantry squad attack by 24%. Counterattacks have a 20% chance to grant a shield to oneself at a factor of 1700. That can only be triggered once every 3 seconds. So with counterattacks coming every second, this gives you once every 5 seconds that it's going to be triggering. So you can anticipate this triggering typically once every 5 seconds. If you're lucky enough, you could have it closer than that, but anticipate this triggering once every 5 seconds, okay? Now, why is this good? Well, because shield in this game is now much more beneficial than heals, because heals basically just send more troops to the hospital, making them more expensive to run. Shield blocks the damage inevitably, or blocks the damage entirely, which basically just... It's basically like adding the troops without adding the deaths, which is why shielding is so effective, okay? Now we've got Mighty Boar, which is a passive skill adding a 30% bonus to the obtained shield. While the shield is active, counter damage increases by 27%. So now we're getting a shield here, a shield factor of 1700 plus an additional 30%. So 30% of 1700 is going to be an additional 530. So now we're looking at that shield factor going up to 2200, 2300, and having that trigger fairly actively with increased counter damage. And then lastly, once you have her awakened, she gets a new skill. When taking skill damage, has a 50% chance to grant a shield to oneself for 3 seconds, which can only be triggered once every 6 seconds. So I mean, this is going to be pretty much every single time you take that. Every single time that you take that skill damage, she's going to be getting that additional shield. So she's got 2 shields here, and she's got a 30% bonus to the obtained shield. Okay, so you're getting 2,000 here plus an additional, what is that, 6,600 or 660. So 2,600 on a shield here. You're getting 2,300 or 2,200 on a shield here. And if you pair her with someone like Raigoro, who also provides a shield, you can start to see that synergy and that shielding actually do very, very well. There's also real reasons why she can actually be worked with someone like Robert or Bodala in the field, because she synergizes well with the shield. But again, remember that most of her benefits, right, that massive squad defense comes when she's garrisoning, and the other defense comes when she's fighting in Alliance territory. So you're not going to send her rallies with her, right? You're not going to send her on a rally because you're really missing a huge portion of her kit, even though she does have these shielding effects so that, you know, you could technically send her on a tanky rally if you wanted to. You're losing out on a lot of her skills, so you wouldn't. But she does synergize very well with Raigoro. In fact, Raigoro Riven is one of the best infantry garrison lines that you can have right now. So Raigoro is free, so he still has play, right? This is one of those things where Raigoro, with the introduction of Riven, was basically given a whole brand new life. Okay, so Raigoro Riven, super, super strong. If you do want to use her in the field, you use her with someone who also provides a shield. You can use her with someone like Robert, for example, who provides a shield. You can use him with someone like Bodala, who provides that shield. You could use him with someone like Eddie, who, for example, provides a shield as well, and then has that squad debuff when the shield is removed. So there's tons of avenues that you can use her, but where she really, really shines, and this is why we put her in garrison, is because of the fact that she deals so much damage while garrisoning, which is something that obviously infantry misses a lot of. She's got a decent amount of defense. She's got a decent amount of counter damage bonus. And then obviously with the additional shielding that she does, she makes it very, very, very tanky. So a really, really good hero to be focusing on if you haven't yet. Next, we're going to talk about my actual favorite hero in the game. His name is stunt actor Thunder Peterson, and he was my first awakened hero that I managed to get, and I was very happy to get him. I still use him to this day just because my Raigoro is yet to be awakened, and he still is pretty effective. He still does a lot of things, making for tanky lines, allowing for counter rallies, and allowing for sustain. What he is lacking, though, is damage. He doesn't do damage by himself. He is fully defensive, which is why you have to pair him with someone like Riven, who provides a decent amount of damage, or pairing him with other, like, Bodalas or Miyamotos, things like that. If you're going to use him in the field, for example, which I will talk about a little bit, I would typically lead with someone like Miyamoto or Adat or Bodala, and then have Thunder as a co-lead so that he's providing more of that sustainability and, relying on the skills talent tree, which provides for more heals, more damage, and, more sustainability overall. But as we go through his skills heal, you'll see exactly why he still is a great hero. The only problem, because of his damage, though, and because of his heal, he is one of the most expensive heroes in the game to use, simply because he does lead to far more troops ending up in the hospital, which ends up with more troops dying at the end of it, and having to heal and speed up and pay the resources to get those troops back. Just does make him one of the most expensive heroes in the game to maintain. But that doesn't mean he's not good. He is, like I said, super tanky, and he's got great sustain, okay? So let's look at what those skills are so we can start to see how effective he is. First off, Super Thunder. Okay, this is his rage skill requiring 1,000 rage, where we recover HP every second for 5 seconds at a heal factor of 2,800, okay? So in reality, we're healing 10,000 plus an extra 4,000. That's almost 14,000 is what we're healing. And if you think that most people, for example, are dealing 13,000 damage, this guy basically counters pretty much anybody's skill. Anybody's skill damage, and reduces the attack of up to 3 squads in a fan-shaped area ahead of you by 30% for 2 seconds, reducing Rider squad attack by an additional 15%. So obviously he hates Riders. This is back when Sven was really kind of the be-all and end-all. He could pretty much do anything, when Sven was kind of the best siege hero in the game. So they released Thunder to kind of counter that, and this is one of the ways that they address that, by reducing that attack by an additional 15%, so you're getting a reduction of 45% on Rider squads that are targeting Thunder, okay? Next, we've got Armed Fortification being a passive skill, increasing infantry squad HP by 30% and defense by 10%. This is regardless of where he is. So again, these are situations where you can use him not necessarily in garrison. You don't have to. He can play in the field because he does have this debuff in a fan shape. So you can obviously providing more of a debuff in the field as well. And then obviously having that huge HP, 30% is pretty big, especially since HP is so valuable. Okay, so having that in the field is pretty decent as well. Reduces squads, now we got Gutsy Stunt, reduces squads damage received from basic attacks by 30%, and then while garrisoned, increases counter damage by an additional 22%. So again, this is why you can still use him in the field, because he does have that basic attack reduction by 30% regardless, but you have increased damage when you're garrisoned, so he's going to be punching a little bit harder when he likes to do what he does. Lastly, Secret Base, when garrisoning, reduces all damage taken by 12%. Also has a 10% chance to recover HP by 2200 when counter-attacking, can be triggered once every 6 seconds. So this reduction right here by 12% is pretty huge because that's a flat damage reduction, right? It's not just reducing skill damage or basic attack damage. This is all damage, which is a pretty substantial one. Granted, it's only when garrisoning, so you're not getting that in the field, but you are still getting this second additional heal in your field when counterattacking. So, although his kit does have garrison benefits to it, where you want to play him, there is still some flexibility in the field if you want to take him there as well. Just remember, he doesn't do additional damage. He's simply there for sustain. Now, his last skill role model, when you do level him up and finally awaken him, does provide some bonuses here where you're going to be increasing the damage for you and nearby allies by 15% after using a skill up to 3 squads. So this is where, for example, if I have him leading with Riven as a co-lead, he's going to pop his skill, provide the additional 15%, and then Riven's damage is going to proc, providing that 15% damage on hers as well. So there is a little synergy when you're going to run Thunder and Riven in garrison, or if you're going to run Thunder and somebody else in garrison, remember that you want to put Thunder in first so that you're getting that bonus damage, that bonus 15% damage from his awakened skill. Okay, and as you can see, he still is my main garrison hero, at least until I have Raigoro awakened, which I don't have currently. I'm still a little bit away from that, but that's definitely my next focus in regards to being a garrison main. Okay, so now that we've talked about Thunder, let's actually talk about Raigoro. Thunderstorm Raigoro. He is an OG character. He's been around for a long time. He kind of fell out of play when Thunder was released because of Thunder's, influence in the game. But he's now getting that resurgence because of how Riven is now basically superseded Thunder in that positioning, right? Since heal kind of took a fall off when Julia came in with silencing and things like that, we started to see more of this focus on shield aspects as well. So pairing Raigoro with Riven, for example, as we go through his kit, you'll start to see how that synergy really, really works out. Okay? So first and foremost, we've got Guardian Deity. A rage skill requiring 1000 activates a shield that absorbs damage for 3 turns, a damage factor at 9600. Raigoro recovers 20 rage for any enemy that attacks him, up to 60 rage per turn. So again, you can use him in the field. That's not going to be a problem. Having, being swarmed and things like that, you're going to be generating more rage and providing more skills. But this is where I'm a little curious, and I'm not sure, and I'm basing it on the wording of the game. This is the way that I think it is. No one's been able to tell me otherwise. If it is wrong, let me know in the comments. But this is worded differently than any other shield that we have in the game. If you look at this, for example, we see this where we have a shield factor at 1200, right? So it's going to block 1200 damage, or it's got a life of 1200. If you look at Raigoro's, it says absorbs damage for 3 turns. That damage factor at 9600. So to me, the way this is explained, and I still haven't been able to, because I'm not super great when it comes to looking through reports and crunching the actual numbers. To me, this means that he's going to absorb that damage, 9600, every 3 turns. Unless it's 9600 over the total for 3 turns. But the way that it's worded means to me that he's going to absorb 9600 damage right, for 3 turns, right? So 3 seconds or 3 whatever it is, like 3, right, for 3 seconds. And then a recovering rage for enemy that attacks him during that time, during those 3 seconds, right? So that's what it seems like to me, which means that this shield is one of the most potent shields in the entire game. And according to some of the reports that I've seen where, you know, some of those exchanges that you're getting on the tower, you know, some of the damage that he's getting that he's able to block, it seems to me that that's the case. But again, I could be wrong. It could just be based on the way that it's worded. But to me, this is worded as one of the strongest shields in the game, which provides a ridiculous amount of defense. Okay? Because to absorb that 9,600 damage for 3 turns means that, in theory, you're absorbing almost 30,000 damage. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense but that's the way that it's worded. So if it's not, IGG really has to word this differently, because that's the way that I read this. Okay? Again, take it with a grain of salt. I might be wrong. That's possible. But the way that it's worded to me, this is the way that it's worded to me. Now we've got Yorikiri, which is a passive skill increasing squad counter damage by 20%. And then when attacked, reduces the attacker's travel speed by 25%, lasting for 5 seconds. This attack effect can be triggered only once in 10 seconds. So this is going to increase that squad counter damage, which is great when he's in garrison position. However, when he's on the field, if he's being chased or if he's trying to get away, to reduce 25% travel speed reduction every time he's attacked, that's pretty substantial. Now, granted, it can only be triggered once every 10 seconds, so it does mean that they're going to continue kind of catching up to him, but it is going to give him time to kind of get away and still provide that additional counter damage while he's running away. Okay? Next, we've got Oshidashi, which is a passive skill increasing the infantry squad attack by 15% and defense by 15%. Not exclusive to anything else, hence why he can still be used in the field. Okay? Next, we've got Yokozuna. Increases damage dealt by 7% when shield is activated. Actually, sorry. Increases damage dealt by 16% when shield is activated. And then when garrisoning, increases HP by an additional 11%. So we're getting attack going up. We're getting defense going up. We're getting counter damage going up. We're getting a massive amount of rage and damage being reduced. Like flat damage being reduced. And then obviously a huge increase in damage when the shield is active. So you're going to be punching harder when you have that shield, and it's going to be triggering fairly active. Now you put this on with someone like Riven, who produces additional shields. You can start to see how having your additional damage increased by 16% is pretty huge, because that's a flat damage increase. Lastly, when he's awakened, Yorikiri changes. So instead of providing an increased squad counter damage by 20% and then reducing by 25%, we have reduces damage taken by squads by 5%. So it's a flat damage reduction across the board, and then increases squad counter damage by 30%, and then reduces the travel speed by 30%. So we're getting both an increase in the squad counter damage done, an increase in the squad travel speed reduction, and a blanket 5% damage reduction when he's awakened. So you can start to see how he's incredibly tanky. You can use him for multi-rallies if you want, or multi-rally garrisons if you want, for example, because he does have that counter damage increase. You can use him in the field if you needed additional heroes for additional sustain. So I like to run Bodala Raigoro, for example, in the field. Is a really, really tanky line in the field. Is a good one. And they synergize very well. Okay? But this is Raigoro. Still one of the best. If you're going to put him in Garrison, you're going to run him in Riven. You can run him in Thunder, but that's not going to be as good. Or you'd run Thunder him. Thunder Raigoro. You can still run Raigoro Tom, would still do pretty decently well if you don't have Stella or Thunder Awakened. You can still run Raigoro Tom and still do pretty well. You can run something like Raigoro Victor if you've got Victor. But again, we'll go through those heroes in a totally different point. My point is Raigoro still has play, especially now with Riven being in play. Okay? Lastly, when we're talking about garrison heroes, let's talk about the Racing Lion Tom. Let me rephrase that. Racing Lion Tom. Now, the reason why I have him in the 4th position here and why we're going over him last is because, unfortunately, he is quite outdated. He doesn't have the impact. He doesn't have the life that Raigoro has anymore. He doesn't have the same capabilities. Yes, you can put him with Thunder, for example, because we do have increasing healing effects. So, you put Thunder Tom, for example, is going to have a ton of heals, going to be a ton of tank, but not dealing a lot of damage. So it's going to lead to a lot of troop death. And unfortunately, Tom is just one of these heroes, though, as much as he still has use, right? You can still use a Dut Tom in the field, for example, and you'll see his kit. He still has play. He's just a little outdated. His damage is a little bit low. So in reality, he's going to be one of those heroes that you're going to pick when you've got nobody else. Okay, he's not someone you're running to first, but he's definitely going to be one that you'll have, later in the game, or if you're looking for that additional to run 4 marches, or some of that flex pick. But he's definitely not the first one you're running to. But we still want to run over him and show exactly why he does what he does and where you can have some play with him. So first and foremost, we got Power Crash, is a rage skill requiring 1,000 rage, where he's going to slam into a target in front and deal damage at 6,000 damage, and then boosts the squad morale by healing lightly wounded units in the squad by a value of 4,000, and then reduces damage taken by you and nearby allies up to 3 by 15% for 3 seconds. So he's going to punch a little bit, he heals a little bit, and then reduces the incoming damage by 15%. Taken by you in up to 3 squads. So there's still some flex, and that reduction of damage taken, 15%, is still pretty good, but only 6,000 damage taken and only 4,000 heal is not necessarily as impactful as you want it to be, especially when you have some of these skills coming at but over 14,000 damage, right? Next, we've got Double Quarterback. Squad's counterattacks have a 10% chance to deal bonus damage at a factor of 4,000. Can only be triggered once every 3 seconds. Now, I'm not sure why they have this can only be triggered once every 3 seconds, because a 10% chance to deal damage means that your chances are going to have this effect once every 10 seconds. Okay, so anticipate once every 10 seconds. Does it mean that you can't do it back to back? No. Right? You could have it trigger once every 3 seconds for a stint, but it's not going to be consistent. Consistently, you can average once every 10 seconds, unless you're taking multi-rallies, or unless you've got 3 or 4 rallies on you, at which point you're looking at once every 3 seconds, things like that, based on those counterattacks going out. But in reality, with a 10%, it's still a low bonus, and unfortunately, the damage at only 4,000 isn't really substantial. Next, we've got his passive skill, Special Defense, where we're going to increase the infantry squad defense and HP both by 15%, which again is pretty good because we're getting that HP. But again, when we look at some of these other ones where they're providing 30% or sometimes 42% to defense, 15% is just kind of substandard in comparison. Lastly, we've got Absolute Defense, where we're increasing healing effects by up to 30% at max level. When garrisoning increases infantry squad defense by 18%. So in reality, we're only getting defense going up by 32 or 33% total at max level, only when garrisoning. And if you look at, like we mentioned, if you look at someone like Riven, for example, who, by themselves is providing 15% defense, 30% HP, 32% defense when garrisoning, it just means that he falls out of place in comparison. His skills just don't do near as much. Now, granted, if you pair him with Thunder, who's healing a lot, that additional 30% healing effect does wonders. But as we've talked, healing just leads to more troops in the hospital, which leads to higher resource bills, higher speed up bills, and in reality, less troops that you can fight in the field with. So just falling out of pace with everybody else. Lastly, when he is awakened, his Power Crash does jump a little bit. So we do go from dealing 6,000 damage to 7,200 damage instead, reducing targets damage by 15% for the next 3 seconds. And so we get a little bit of a change here. So in the first one, we're just dealing 6,000, healing for 4,000, and reducing the damage taken by you and up to nearby nearby allies, 2 additional allies by 15%. But now, when he does awaken, he does a little bit more damage. He reduces the target's damage by 15%, which is pretty big. Heals for 4,800, and then reduces that same 15% by up to 3 squads. So it does make him a little bit more usable once you have him awakened, but it's still kind of subpar when you think about the rest of the damage and the rest of the scaling and the rest of the numbers that we get from a lot of these other heroes. Does that mean he's bad? No. But if you have nobody else, if you don't have a Riven, if you don't have Thunder, if you don't have Victor, he's definitely a good choice. Raigoro Tom still works decently well. in maintaining at least, a long-term defensive garrison, at which point you can counter rally and keep filling and things like that. Is it the best? Again, no, but there are options. Use him in the field if you'd like to as well. He just does the best when you're, he typically is going to do better in the garrisoning positions, just because he does have a lot of these, he does have these that do provide additional defense. That 18% additional defense when garrisoning is important. And things like that. So you kind of want to still keep him there, though he does have other additional uses. He's just getting old. However, guys, that's it. That is all of the garrison heroes, and subsequently all 11 of the legendary infantry heroes we have gone through. This is all 3 parts of the infantry hero deep dive. Next, we will go through riders, then we will go through ranged, and then finally we're going to go through the miscellaneous ones. That'll be your leader heroes like your Victors, your Toms, your Master Jins, things like that. And we'll talk about how to play with them as well and some of those mixed lines that you can do. But that being said, guys, if you liked what you've seen so far, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, fill out the notification bell so you get any new notifications when we drop new content. Go ahead and check out thcemporium.ca for any of your The High Guy merch. Reach out to us if you want to be part of the Who TF Are You podcast. Love, peace, chicken grease, and until next time, stay lifted.